Members, it's the appointed time and we have a quorum. I now invite the deputations, individuals and representatives of the government to join us. At the last meeting on the 16th of August, the Bills Committee made a decision, and on the instruction of the chairman, the Secretariat has already issued an invitation to the public to give their views on the Fire Safety Buildings Amendment Bill 2024. Letters were also sent to the 18 district councils as at the deadline for registration. 10 deputations and individuals indicated that they would attend the meeting today. And some of the deputations have already submitted their submissions. And then we've also received 2 submissions from a deputation and an individual who have indicated that they will not attend the meeting. Members could refer to paper number CB bracket 21145/2024 bracket 012 bracket 04. The submissions have been uploaded to our website. First, I would like to welcome the deputations and individuals who are here to give their views. If I may remind you, please speak into the microphone when it's your turn to speak. And you could also use the earphone if you wish. Chat 0 is the floor, 1 is Cantonese, 2 is English, and channel 3 is 普通话. I'd like to remind those attending the meeting to give their views. Now, when you make your representations to the Bills Committee, you do not enjoy the privileges and protection under the Legislative Council Powers and Privileges Ordinance, Cap 382. Similarly, the submissions you submit to us are not protected by this ordinance. I'd also like to remind all attending meeting or those in the public gallery that please pay attention to the various security measures in the note for members of the public attending meetings in conference rooms or observing meetings in public galleries in the Legislative Council complex. The note is attached to the letter sent by the Secretariat to the various deputations. The note is also tabled before you. And for those in the public gallery, you could ask for a copy of the notes from the security staff of this council. Now, I would like to invite Mr. Howard Yum, Deputy Secretary for Security, to speak first. I would also like to welcome other government representatives for coming to the meeting. Mr. Yan, please. Thank you. Thank you, Chairman. Representatives of deputations and individuals, thank you for coming to the meeting. First, on the Fire Service Buildings Amendment Bill 2024, I would like to briefly introduce the bill to you. The bill, or rather, the Fire Safety Buildings Ordinance Cap 572, requires that for pre-1987 composite and domestic buildings, the fire safety standards must be upgraded to meet the modern standards. The government has been providing various forms of support to owners of old buildings for them to carry out the relevant fire safety upgrading works. and we give them the technical support, financial support, also support in terms of coordination. But then for some owners, in particular owners of 3 new buildings, they do not have the capacity to organize such works or coordinate with owners, so they come across difficulties in complying with the relevant requirements. Therefore, we need to come up with targeted measures to help owners with genuine difficulties to comply with the legal requirements. At the same time, for other owners of buildings, we will also help them to comply with the relevant ordinance. Now, there are 2 main purposes for this bill. First, we are making reference to the experience of under the buildings ordinance for maintenance of building, and also there is a defaulted works mechanism under the buildings ordinance, so that for owners who could not the owners of targeted buildings who could not comply with the relevant direction or orders, then works could be carried out on their behalf. And then after the completion of works, the cost of the defaulted works and surcharge will be recovered from the owners. So for owners with genuine difficulties, they will be given assistance to upgrade their fire safety standards. And then, we also introducing various measures to help owners comply with the relevant orders and directions. For example, there are provisions to deal with uncooperative owners. We also want to prevent anyone from blocking or obstructing the owner's cooperation from complying with the relevant requirements of the ordinance. And then there will also be a registration of the surcharge and so on in the land registry. So we have the 5 safety improvement scheme, subsidy scheme, so that to help owners to comply, that is the 5 safety improvement work subsidy scheme, SWS, and also there may be cases of train owners not being that cannot be traced and so on. So we under the scheme we will offer a subsidy of up to 60% of the cost of the works and other fees related. And then we also want to make clear that compliance with the fire safety compliance order is a due obligation of the owners. It's only under certain circumstances that we will carry out defaulted works on behalf of owners. Now, there was the great third alarm fire involving the Lucky House, and so there was much concern about fire safety of old buildings. So we plan to complete the legislative exercise for this bill within this year, and we submitted the amendment bill in July, and then the Bills Committee held its first meeting to consider the legislative amendments. We hope the Council will pass this bill as soon as possible so that we could improve the fire safety standards of old buildings. Now, as we take forward work in relation to this amendment bill, which aims to improve fire safety standards, we will give technical, financial support, and also we will take enforcement action. So we adopt a multi-pronged approach to improve the fire safety standards of old buildings. We want to provide a safe living environment for the public. We are going to listen carefully to your views, and after you give your views, I will give a response. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Yam, Deputy Secretary. Now I invite the deputations and individuals to speak. You will each have 4 minutes to speak. Please watch the time. And if you have not yet submitted your written submissions, please do so after the meeting, or you could either give us a copy of the submission or your speech after the meeting. First, Ms. Lau Pui Yok. Mr. Chairman, members of the Council, representatives of the government, I'm a Sham Shui Po District Councillor from the DAB. I'm Lau Pui Yok. I've served my district for over a decade. So I've been helping with some old buildings to comply with various orders, in particular for buildings covered by the fire safety directions 527. Now, in my experience, I find that many of the older buildings or single block buildings encounter great difficulties in complying with the fire safety directions 572. Now, there are several reasons. First of all, for 3 new buildings, they may not be able to identify trace the owners. And in some cases, maybe they have owners, corporations, but they don't have a management company, so they don't have the capacity to organize the works. And then in some buildings, there are unauthorized building works, and someone is illegally occupying common paths, so it's not possible to install fire safety facilities. And then some buildings are so old, there's not enough loading to accommodate additional fire safety facilities, and then the maintenance or the installation costs are high. Some owners cannot afford them. And then for many of the pre-1987 buildings, they are next to redevelopment areas, so owners are reluctant to carry out the works. So for various reasons, there's a delay in complying with the fire safety orders or directions, and at the end, the deadline is passed. And many owners have asked us to pass on view to the government. They would rather the government take up the works on their behalf. And this is also a proposal from the DAB. We're glad to see that the Bureau is taking up this suggestion. So for owners without the capacity or that encounter difficulties in carrying out works, the government will do the works for them, and then they will recover the cost. This because small owners do have difficulties trying to organize or coordinate the work, and they have to go through various cumbersome processes. But here, I like to express my concerns. I also like to ask some questions. First, for some buildings, which of them are eligible for default works? Can you explain that further? Because for small owners, if the building is 3 stories high or 5 stories high, they have to fall within the redevelopment area or whatever, because owners do not know all the details now. Now, for some buildings that have been issued with the directions, there are many of them. We're talking about thousands of them. Only a small portion of buildings have complied with the orders. And maybe you say that maybe there could be certain obstacles in building, inherent obstacles, and then the government may take up the works. So do you mean there are unauthorized building works in the building? And you say if a building is unable to organize the works after a number of times, then you will take up the works. But how many times are we talking about? And then say after the government has completed the defaulted works, and maybe after some time there's this repair and there's a need to carry out repair or maintenance, and will the government do it again, or will they only do the defaulted works one-off? And then the third question, now there is fire safety improvement work subsidy scheme, and maybe some of the fire safety compliance orders have expired. And then can you perhaps strengthen coordination? So maybe for buildings with orders that have expired, they could also be included. Now, I must commend the support team of the Fire Services Department. Miss Lau, your time is up. Miss Lau, next please. Next one, Mr. Leung Ping Kin.
Good afternoon. I'm District Councillor of Sham Shui Po. I'm a registered social worker. Sham Shui Po is an area where we have lots of ethnic minorities. We have 1,800 buildings in Sham Shui Po, and 70% of them are aged 50 years or above. Sham Shui Po is quite densely populated because we have a lot of subdivided units in buildings with a lot of building problems. According to statistics, over 6,000 buildings in Sham Shui Po have subdivided units. So we believe that fire safety is of a major concern. There are some 90,000 people in Sham Shui Po who are aged 65 or above, and many of them are aged owners. For this legislative amendment exercise, many ethnic minority families who are affected have expressed concern. So we hope that more support could be given. In terms of the defaulted works mechanism, thresholds have been set, empowering the EAs to carry out the defaulted works. We hope that the thresholds would be clear, transparent, and objective. Some owners may not get the assistance they need, and this should be avoided. We should also prevent abuse of the mechanism. And the government should explain very clearly to affected owners as to how they should apply for assistance. And as the previous speaker said, whether the assistance scheme or subsidy schemes could be applied for by the applicants again. And how do we ensure that the cost would be reasonable? How do we avoid unreasonable costs being imposed, or that many add-on works would be carried out, causing an excessive burden on old owners? Apart from financial assistance, will there be technical assistance as well? Many members of OCs work on a voluntary basis. They may not have the necessary background or technical know-how. Now, the population in Sham Shui Po is also very mobile. We have new owners. So in terms of property transactions, can more be done to educate the new owners about their responsibility to ensure fire safety? Perhaps in the sale and purchase agreement, clauses should be included to ensure that they fulfill the responsibility. And about 3-nil buildings, the owners concerned lack coordination capability. And on top of that, they are not being given sufficient attention. For example, many owners complain that they are unable to trace all the owners in order to chip in for the repair works. So how will the government assist the owners of 3-nil buildings, especially under the defaulted works mechanism? What can be done to help owners who are committed to ensuring fire safety? And also for support for owners of old buildings in Sham Shui Po. As I said, we have a lot of elderly in the district. Many of them are members of the OCs, and they also need to shoulder certain liabilities as a result. So with passage of the bill, the government should ensure that all owners and members of the public will be able to comply with the legislation. I support the amendment. Thank you. Next, Mr. Lee Hoi Tat, representing the Hong Kong Institute of Surveyors. Yes, I support. I am chair of the committee of the Hong Kong Institute of Surveyors. I'm Lee Hoi Tat. The institute supports the government's effort to ensure building safety. So in principle, we support this legislative amendment as well. The penalties should be increased, and that defaulted works should be carried out on behalf of owners who are unable to comply with the directions or orders. But we do have some questions for the government. First, in relation to the advisory committees, they will give advice to the enforcement authorities. Now, as the current legislation stands, may I know more about the decisions that have been made by the advisory committees? What are the cases involved? And with the involvement of the advisory committees, will the progress be expedited or will the process be lengthened? There are also authorized officers, auxiliary persons, and specified persons. May I know more about the qualifications and responsibilities of the personnel I mentioned? Will there be definitions provided in the legislation? And according to the bill, payment will have to be made within 30 days or interest may be incurred. For elderly owners or those facing financial hardship, we believe the time frame of 30 days is too short. Will the government consider extending the payment period or exercise discretion to allow extensions? About the cost of defaulted works, they mainly entail the cost of works. What about the cost of consultants, as well as the costs involved in the pre-work stage? Next, I'd like to turn to the grounds for extending the time frame and also the authority for approving applications. Where does the authority lie? As I understand, many owners at the moment are already making applications to extend the time. So will there be clear criteria on extension of the time frame? Also, for the time frame for completing the directions, will the government consider the scale of the buildings or the existence of owners' corporations before determining the time frame? Next, from the Professional Buildings Surveying Consultants Association of Hong Kong, Mr. Che Chi-kin. Thank you, Chairman. Government officials, good afternoon. I am Chair of the Professional Building Surveying Consultants Association of Hong Kong. I'm Che Chi-kin. Our association supports a legislative amendment. We believe this is the right direction in improving fire safety of buildings. How do we understand from the bill that there are advisory committees? We want to know the composition of these advisory committees. Do they hold regular meetings? Can you give us examples on what they have deliberated on? We believe that the advisory committees should be composed of members of professionals and members of institutes. This association is formed by 17 associations of professional surveyors. We also give professional advice to the government. If need be, the association is happy to send representatives to join the advisory committees. And about transfer of interest or transfer of title, I do have some questions. Now, according to the bill, upon transfer of title within 3 months, the new owner will be required to inform the enforcement authority in writing. May I know if a form or a template will be provided? After purchasing the property, the new owner may forget to notify the EA in writing, and as a result, this owner may be breaching the law. Does the government allow automatic notification in the process so as to prevent new owners from being penalized in case they forget to inform the enforcement authority? After transfer of interest, will the government allow extension of time for the new owner to comply with the directions? Next, Chair of the Incorporated Owners of Manor Center, Mr. Chong Man-ching. Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, government officials. Well, I am chair of some owners' corporations of a number of buildings relating to building maintenance. I support the government's initiative in improving fire safety standards of pre-1987 buildings. The government also provides subsidies to owners. Unfortunately, in terms of actual implementation, we run into some problems. We joined the smart tender exercise of the URA, and yet some owners refuse to contribute to the cost of maintenance. They even engage lawyers. Now, some owners with a larger undivided share may be involved in sums of up to $10 million. In fact, one owner is involved in a sum of $4.5 million. And this owner refuses to pay up. Well, some owners also refuse to pay management fee of up to $4.5 million or even up to $10 million altogether. And they affect the maintenance fund's operations. On the one hand, we need to comply with the legislation, which is a good thing in terms of ensuring building safety. But at the same time, some owners are reluctant to comply with the law and they will be penalized. I support that as well. However, some major owners refuse to contribute to the cost of maintenance. And if they refuse to pay up, in the end, we will be punished according to the penalty set out. If we take this matter to the court, owners will have extra burden on their shoulders. We need help. I hope the government will understand our predicament and give us help. Thank you. Next, Mr. Miu Hoi Ming. Thank you, Chairman. I'm Miu Hoi Ming. I'm from Sham Shui Po. My area of work is in the maintenance of old buildings. We support the Fire Safety Buildings Amendment Bill 2024. Cap 572 was enacted in 2007, and that's since it has come into operation, the government has been providing assistance and different subsidies. Over 1,000 target buildings have fully complied with the works orders. For other buildings, for some reasons, they're unable to comply with the order. Very often, there are misunderstandings and conflicts between small owners and fire service works contractors. Many owners have this misconception. They may not consider improvement of fire safety of their buildings the top priority. In recent years, owners of 3 new buildings or old buildings become untraceable. According to the law, we are required to form owners' corporations. But some owners are not traceable, and as a result, works cannot be carried out. Only when the matter is taken to court would we be able to locate the owners. In the end, every owner is penalized. We are happy to see the bill being tabled, which will target 3 problems. First, defaulted works mechanism. Second, promoting owners to voluntarily comply with the orders, and also other areas. I have a number of suggestions. First, on defaulted works mechanism, the government should lay down the number of buildings as target buildings under the mechanism. There should also be more explanation for the benefit of the public. Third suggestion, for adjoining buildings, the government should adopt new thinking and carry out defaulted works at once to expedite the progress. And that for adjoining buildings, the defaulted works perhaps could share the common facilities such as fire service water tanks to lower the cost. There are also other suggestions to ensure compliance of orders. For example, the FSD has rolled out a social service team to provide support. This can help mobilize owners of old buildings to get involved. NGOs, property management companies should be engaged to help buildings facing more difficulties by providing technical advice. A new subsidy scheme should be rolled out to incentivize owners and owners corporations who are willing to comply with the orders to carry out works. A new scheme should also be rolled out on fire safety to encourage the OCs to comply with the legislative requirements as soon as possible. In terms of increasing penalties, we have the following suggestions. For non-compliant owners, we should step up penalties. And there should also be a mitigation mechanism for owners who have been active in forming OCs and taking things forward. They should be granted leniency in terms of financial penalty. Third, some buildings may have fully or partially complied with the orders under Cap 572, and that the orders may not have been discharged, and more should be done to go after the contractors.
Next, Hong Kong Institute of Engineers, Mr. Bao Wai-keng. Yes, I was the last chairman of the Fire Service Division of the Institute. Now, we have a dense population and densely developed urban areas. In the Fire Safety Buildings Ordinance, Cap 572 came into operation in 2007. It requires the upgrading of fire safety standards of pre-1987 composite and domestic buildings to meet modern standards. These are called target buildings. We know that the government has already launched various measures, including support measures to help owners of target buildings to meet the requirements of the ordinance. Now, for various reasons, in the course of trying to comply with the reference orders, owners of old buildings came across various issues, and that's why many of the works could not be completed. That's why the Institute welcomes and supports the 10 measures put forward by the administration in this legislative amendment exercise. For individual proposals, we would like to comment as follows. First, on the defaulted works mechanism, we agree the government needs to set up a clear, objective and transparent mechanism to help owners with genuine difficulties in complying with the reference orders. Our institute believes that there's need to expand the functions of the two existing advisory committees under the ordinance so that they could help the government in advising them on setting priorities of target buildings. And then they could also offer technical advice on defaulted works. And they could also help the administration to select the best options for carrying out defaulted works. After the completion of defaulted works, the government could charge recover costs of the works as well as not more than 20% of the surcharge from owners. But then there must be a clear and objective mechanism, so owners will know exactly under what circumstances they may the owners could pay a reduced surcharge or even be waived the surcharge. Encouraging owners to voluntarily comply with orders. For buildings that are not eligible for defaulted works, then the legal charge should be imposed on units of the building, so potential owners know that there is this liability. And then this is a good incentive for owners to comply with the orders. This is to make sure they maintain the value of their buildings. And then within 3 months upon the completion of a transaction, the new owner must inform the authority about the transfer of interest. Now, this is to make sure that the cooperative owners won't have excuse from and obstruct other owners from carrying out the works. Now we want to, as I said, we want to encourage owners to comply with the order. So our institute agrees that the penalty level should be raised. Now the maximum fine on non-compliance with the fire safety compliance orders and fire safety directions will be increased from $100,000 and $200,000 to, and also from $10,000 to $20,000 for the daily fine. And then if there's obstruction of the OCs from carrying out their duties, then it's also an increase in the fine, and the institute supports that too. Now, the government also supports the proposal to give further fund injection to the Fire Safety Improvement Work Safe Subsidy Scheme. And then relevant information should be published too. We believe it is reasonable, so that owners will know what legal liabilities there are involving different buildings when the relevant orders and directions are published. So we believe the proposed amendments will improve fire safety. Next. Mr. Choi Siu-Fung. I'm Yau Chi Wong District Councillor. I'm also a lawyer from the DAB. Now we had a meeting with the Reference Bureau and we exchanged views on the amendment bill. We believe there could be further consideration about the bill in terms of legal aspects. Defaulted works mechanism. The DAB and my team have always been asked the government to consider this mechanism, and in this bill our proposal has been taken on board, and we thank the administration for that, and we welcome and support the bill. Now the enforcement authorities, that is the buildings department and the fire service department, will carry out defaulted works on behalf of owners who could not carry out the works. So it involves some legal authorization in the legal sense. And so even if there are uncooperative owners, they cannot obstruct the works from being carried out, and that's a major improvement of the current arrangement. Now, what are the criteria to be considered in carrying out defaulted works? The age of the building, the definition of 3 new buildings, and so on. There has to be clear definitions for all the eligibility criteria. This will then ensure that the scheme will be carried out fairly and transparently. And after the defaulted works are completed, how would the government recover the cost and surcharge from owners? And if there are disputes, how will they be dealt with? So there's room for defining the details further, because we don't want to see legal disputes in future. On fire safety and building management, the government has already been offering various forms of support, technical, financial, and so on. So we support the government in enhancing further these measures. Now there are various other issues too. So there's need to thresh out all the details, is to make sure that those owners with genuine needs will benefit from the mechanism. We don't want anyone to abuse the mechanism. Now on the actual legal and operational details, whether there's need for full cooperation between the government and owners for the bill to work well, and then we can enhance fire safety standards in Hong Kong. So I speak in support of the passage of the bill. Thank you. Next, Mr. Alex Poon. Thank you. I'm Yao Chu Mo District Councillor Alex Poon. The DAB team has always supported legislative amendments. The defaulted works mechanism will empower the authorities to carry out fire service improvement works on behalf of owners, and also the government could then recover the cost from the owners. This will make sure there is effective compliance with the relevant orders and directions. In particular, some owners may not have the capacity to carry out work, so this is an important form of support to owners. But then we want the government to provide clear criteria. And at the same time, it is necessary to ensure that the defaulted works will only benefit owners with genuine needs. That's all what the DAB has always been striving for. We want the government to support owners in need. And the bill also proposes to expand the functions of the existing advisory committees, so the committee could provide various advice to the government on technical issues, on setting priorities, and so on. Now, will local representatives of various districts be appointed to these committees because they know best what the situation is like in different districts. Now, there was the fire involving the Lucky House, and then in Yao Chi Mong there are buildings where there's obstruction of works by certain parties. So that's why we support the defaulted works mechanism, and we support this bill. So the Fire Safety Buildings Amendment Bill 2024 will help to upgrade fire safety standards, and there will be suitable assistance to owners in need. And the bill has considered all the various aspects carefully. So at the same time, with the DAB therefore supports the bill, because then it will encourage everyone to work together to upgrade fire safety standards. Thank you. Next. Mr. Lee from the Institute of Fire from the Institute of Fire Engineers, Hong Kong branch. Now, we organize some seminars and various meetings to promote professional knowledge about fire safety. On the 10th of August 2022, we invited members to attend the online briefing organized by the Security Bureau on the Fire Safety Buildings Ordinance Cap 572. The ordinance is to require the upgrading of fire safety standards of pre-1987 composite domestic buildings to meet modern fire protection requirements. We agree that this is the duty and obligation of owners to ensure the safety standards of the building. Now, but the government has been providing support such as financial support, helping owners to organize and coordinate works, on also giving technical support to owners. But then still some owners of old buildings encountered difficulties. So this bill puts forward 10 proposals, such as the defaulted to works mechanism, expanding the terms of reference of the existing advisory committees, giving financial support to owners in need, and so on. So our institution supports all these proposals. We hope that the bill will be passed as soon as possible to improve the fire safety standards of old buildings. Now, the government also proposes to increase the penalty level. It's made reference to the Fire Services Fire Hazard Abatement Regulation in relation to the penalty for non-compliance with fire hazard and abatement notice and fire hazard order. The fine is to be increased from level 4 to level 6 for non-compliance with the fire safety directions, and then the fine for non-compliance with the fire safety compliance order will be increased from level 5. Now, well, if it's for the fire hazard abatement, it's about endangering fire safety. So we agree that the penalty should be high. But then with this ordinance, even if the reference order is not complied with, it doesn't mean that the overall fire safety standards of the building will be lowered, because it's just about further enhancing fire protection. So therefore, we would like to ask the authority for the rationale on aligning the penalty level for under this ordinance with that in the fire service fire hazard abatement regulation. Thank you.
Okay.
Right, thank you, deputations. Next, I will invite Deputy Secretary for Security, Mr. Howard Yam, to respond to the views expressed by the deputations. Yes, thank you, Chairman. First of all, I thank deputations and individuals for attending today's meeting and for giving us a lot of invaluable views on the bill. In general, I understand that the deputations support the bill in principle. I'm going to respond to some specific comments. I will also further elucidate on the thinking behind this bill. Now, there is support for the enforcement authorities, and that is the Buildings Department and Fire Services Department, to carry out defaulted works for owners of target buildings who have failed to comply with the directions orders, and to recover the cost of defaulted works from owners afterwards. Under this mechanism, we can improve fire safety of buildings. For owners of buildings who are unable to comply with the directions or the orders, the government is stepping in to provide more support to small owners. Now, I fully agree with this view. Carrying out defaulted works on behalf of these owners to improve fire safety is the original intent of the bill. Some speakers were concerned about the mechanism under which buildings would be selected. Let me explain that. In order for owners to get the assistance they need, we will consider a basket of factors so that needy owners will get the help they need. Now, some of the deputations mentioned that there should be transparency in terms of the selection criteria for target buildings. That means we should clearly set out the criteria for selecting target buildings for the defaulted works mechanism. This is exactly the policy objective. We want to provide transparency. Now, first of all, we consider whether owners have complied with the fire safety directions or fire safety compliance orders. We consider whether there are missing or untraceable owners, making it impossible to form owners' corporations, or that owners face inherent obstacles when coordinating the works, whether the EAs have exhausted their powers under the ordinance to cause the owners to comply with the directions or orders, but they still fail to comply with the requirements, despite multiple enforcement actions. We also consider whether there are other fire hazards. In terms of the prioritization criteria, we will establish a clear, objective, and transparent mechanism. We propose to expand the terms of reference of the two existing advisory committees so that they can give advice on the prioritization criteria to the enforcement authorities. Now, some deputations mentioned that in terms of the prioritization criteria, we should consider the building age, number of stories, the status of ownership, whether 3 new buildings are involved, and whether there are other fire safety hazards in the buildings, such as subdivided units. A marking scheme should also be devised, according to some. Now, these are some very good ideas. They are in line with the thinking behind this bill. We believe that this mechanism should be objective and clear. We should also consider, of course, the number of stories, whether they are 3 nil or single staircase buildings, the building status, the number of prosecutions against owners, other fire hazards, whether there are unauthorized building works on rooftops, whether there are subdivided units and guest houses. Now, the EA will consider the advice from the advisory committees, and that the marking scheme will be devised to determine the priority of eligible buildings for defaulted works. And we'll also have regard to factors such as the trade's capacity to undertake the work, and before deciding on the number of works to be carried out and when they should be carried out. Just now, some commented that there is a concern about the outstanding target buildings that have yet to comply with the orders, and as a result, the costs of works will go up. I want to reassure the public that we will carefully consider the capacity of the trade in determining the number of defaulted works to be carried out, as well as when they will be carried out. We will also review the implementation after introducing the defaulted works mechanism. We will consider the trade's capacity in taking up the works before deciding every year how many such works should be carried out. Now, the advisory committees will also leverage on the professional knowledge in determining the feasible proposals. We propose to expand the terms of reference of the advisory committees for them to provide professional and objective technical advice on works proposals for the more controversial cases, so that the EAs could consider the advisory committee's professional advice along with other factors in determining the best proposal to go forward. Now, let me elucidate this point. We have representatives of the 2 departments sitting on the advisory committees. We also have members of the professional institutions. We also have we will also have a representative from the Association of Registered Fire Service Installation Contractors of Hong Kong Limited. Along with representatives from different areas with expertise in fire services installations, meaning that they are not representatives of any professional institution or associations, but rather just laymen recommended by the district offices. And these are members of the public from the 18 districts. Upon completion of works, the EA will carry out inspection with the government departments concerned and the contractors to ensure that these installations are up to standards. If need be, we will also request the contractors to carry out rectification works. Some deputations commented whether other works may be added on top of those required by the government, by the contractors. Now, I want to emphasize that we work as a team. In terms of building inspection and maintenance, the government has this platform. The relevant policy bureaus are represented. That is the Development Bureau, Security Bureau, and we also have Fire Services Department, Home Affairs Department, the Buildings Department working on this platform, so that with good coordination, we seek to help owners. We don't work in silos. For special cases, we'll also consider other factors such as effective use of public money, the fire hazards of buildings, and other relevant factors. On recovering the cost of defaulted works, we will draw reference from the Buildings Department's mechanism. For those with genuine practical difficulties such as obstruction to access the common parts of a building, unsuccessful attempt in organizing the required works in the common parts of buildings, then under such circumstances, we will reduce the amount of surcharge. For other special cases, for example, if the owner is old, infirm, disabled, or have genuine practical difficulties in complying with the directions or orders, we'll also reduce or waive the amount. For those with genuine practical difficulties in complying with the directions or orders, we put in place this mechanism to prevent them from taking up excessive burden. Just now, we also heard comments about the government providing a waiver of the surcharge, and this is also in line with our thinking. We believe that under this mechanism, for those who are unable to comply with the directions or orders because of genuine difficulties, but are committed to doing so, assistance will be provided by carrying out defaulted works on their behalf. We also drive owners to comply with the requirements of the ordinance voluntarily. Just now, some deputations mentioned that increasing the penalties will incentivize owners to comply with the directions and the FS compliance orders. In considering the increase in the relevant penalties, we have drawn reference to the similar offences under the Fire Safety Ordinance. That is Cap 95F, the Fire Hazard Abatement Notice, and the relevant penalties under the Fire Safety Abatement Regulation. The maximum penalty is one of level 6, that is $100,000, as well as a daily fine of $10,000 for persistence non-compliance. As for failing to comply with the fire safety compliance order, we have made reference to the fire hazard order under Cap 98F, and that is a maximum fine of $200,000 as well as $20,000 of daily fine for persistence non-compliance. We believe that the relevant penalties have appropriately reflected the culpability of the offenders, and they are proportionate to the nature and the gravity of the offences. They are also effective in hammering home this message to offenders. That means until they have complied with the directions and orders, they will still be liable to penalties. In the written submissions, we note that there are concerns on the proposed penalties and that these penalties should not be too harsh. In considering the proposed increase in penalties, we have made reference to the relevant ordinances in terms of fire safety in buildings. Apart from penalties applicable to offences of a more serious nature, most of the penalties involve only a financial penalty and there is no imprisonment involved. In other words, for other offences relating to fire safety in buildings, the penalties are consistent with what we have proposed. For non-compliance with fire safety directions and fire safety compliance orders, we find it inappropriate to impose a term of imprisonment. According to some deputations, some OCs are unable to complete works because of uncooperative owners. And some committed owners are therefore deterred. According to some, there are owners who refuse to contribute to the cost of maintenance after works have been completed. We understand the problem, and that is why we have made provisions to prevent anyone from obstructing the OCs in complying with the requirements. And we also provide the relevant offences. For example, we propose penalties in relation to the obstruction offence, and that is a fine at level 3, $10,000, and maximum imprisonment term for 6 months. And for those refusing to contribute to the cost of defaulted works, they will be penalised likewise to a fine at level 4, $25,000. For uncooperative owners, they will be deterred from obstructing the work of the OCs. By making provisions in the bill, we help OCs by not having them bringing action to the court themselves in order to recover the costs. We also have other proposals. For example, we make provisions to prevent obstruction to OCs in complying with the requirements. The maximum penalty is one of $25,000 and 6 months imprisonment. We also empower the enforcement authorities to register the directions or orders that have not been complied with in the land registry, that is so-called imposing an encumbrance, in order to drive owners to comply with the requirements. There is also another new requirement, that is, new property owners are required to notify the EA concerned within 3 months after transfer of interest in property. Those who fail to do so will commit an offence. With passage of the bill, the government will get in touch with the Law Society of Hong Kong and REDA and explain the latest requirements, so that at the estate authority, so that lawyers and estate agents will be able to provide the help that new owners may need in order to comply with this new requirement. This is a response to the comment that I heard, that is, a measure should be put in place to provide assistance to new property owners to notify the EA concerned. We also have other enhancement proposals. In terms of serving of documents to owners or occupiers, at the moment, under the current ordinance, the means are limited to personal delivery or registered post to the relevant address. These means are out of date, so we recommend or we propose providing additional means of serving documents, such as by fax, email, and posting them prominently inside the premises. And we also have another enhancement proposal on publishing information of directions on websites. While working on the bill, we will also continue to provide various support to needy owners. In terms of financial assistance, we will expand the eligibility criteria of the Fire Safety Improvement Works Subsidy Scheme to cover the cost of defaulted works. eligible owners may apply through OCs for the subsidy. But on top of that, we consider special circumstances. For example, missing or untraceable owners causing an OC not to be formed. In the past, these owners would not be eligible for subsidy. Now they can also apply for subsidies. They can be subsidized up to 60% of the cost of defaulted works. The Buildings Department and the Fire Services Department will continue to liaise and work closely with the Urban Renewal Authority in taking forward this fire safety improvement work subsidy scheme to benefit more owners. With an injection of $5.5 billion into the scheme, we believe that all the owners of target composite and domestic buildings will be covered.
Just now, there's the suggestions that the government should provide one-stop advisory services. Well, that's what we're working towards. We want to give sufficient support to owners in complying with the relevant orders and directions. So the Fire Services Department has set up the building improvement support center to provide one-stop service to owners. So when owners of target buildings receive the directions, they may be at a loss as to what to do. So the center will provide assistance at the various stages of the process. They will first explain the relevant requirements to owners, and then they will help owners to come to a consensus on the works to be carried out, and then they will also help owners to apply for subsidy and to use the smart tender system, and then they also help them to fill in the application forms and so on. And then on the approval of the works plans and other technical support, the center will also provide that. Then the support center will also help owners to apply for subsidy or reference services as necessary. For example, the smart tender service of the URA. And if necessary, the case may be referred to other departments or organizations for follow-up actions. The Improvement Support Center will help owners every step of the way. They will help owners comply with the directions step by step. Then in the long run, it will upgrade the 5 safety standards of the building concerned. Now, if owners want to learn more about the support services or more about the defaulted work mechanisms and so on, or if they want to learn more also about the condition of their own buildings, they could approach the Building Improvement Support Center. Now, the support center is open from Monday to Saturday from 9 a.m. to 8 p.m. There is no, it is open throughout the day. So this will be convenient for owners to approach the center after they finish work. And then there is also recording service, so owners could leave their contact details after the center is closed, and the center will call the owners as soon as possible during their office hours. So we welcome inquiries from members of the public at this center. The FSD also has the Building Improvement Community Support Team. We leverage on community resources to help owners apply to the Fire Safety Improvement Work Subsidy Scheme, and also to give other forms of assistance to owners. The department works with local bodies such as the care teams to disseminate information on fire safety works. And then the FSC also provides technical support. For example, information on installing water tanks so owners can comply with the relevant orders as soon as possible. Now, of course, you're aware of the work being carried out by the FSDs, as some of you have mentioned. And then we invite owners to attend district talks that are held regularly for owners. And then there are also special help desks to give face-to-face advice to owners. Now, as we take forward the work on this bill, we will continue to provide financial, technical, and other support to owners. We also carry out enforcement actions because we want to create a safe living environment for the public. I would like to thank you all again for coming to the meeting and to give us your invaluable advice. Thank you, Deputy Secretary, for your detailed reply. Now, some members would like to speak. 4 are on the list now. I'll read out the names. Mr. Kwok Wai Keung, Ms. Carmen Kan, Professor Priscilla Leung, and Dr. Lo Wai Kwok. 4 minutes each. Mr. Kwok Wai Keung. Thank you, Chairman. I would like to thank all the deputations and individuals for coming here to give us your views. So we will be able to learn about the views in the community. Now, there are 10 here who spoke. They've all expressed strong support for the bill. And then there are 2 submissions that we've received. I believe they are also in support of the bill. So that means the majority of the submissions and representations are in support of the bill. And even they even embrace the bill, actually, because the bill is to improve science safety standards. At the same time, it addresses the various issues now faced by owners' corporations, such as missing owners, owners refusing to contribute to the cost of works, and some owners will actually have to chip in for the other owners, and then they have to go through tedious legal procedures to recover the funds. So now the bill will give owners, corporations much more help. Now, that's why I'm worried. I wonder if many owners will now wait for the government to help them out in carrying out works. Now, if the surcharge is too low, then people will all ask the government to do the works for them. And then if the cost of the works are low as well, then more will be drawn to take up, to go through this mechanism. Now, so maybe there are many buildings that actually need the service, but then on the list of contractors, there are just over 90 of them. Will they then increase their fees? Will the government monitor to make sure that these contractors are charging reasonable fees? Now, the building department may charge a approval fee, supervision fee, and we're not even counting the surcharge. So, first of all, we want to make sure that the cost of the works are reasonable, and then the government departments may impose other fees. This is to make sure that the whole process is fair and there won't be over-reliance on the mechanism. Can you achieve that? I'm worried that contractors will take this as public works, because with public works, the costs are usually high. They will never be low. Of course, we at the same time considering how we deal with the subdivided units. Now, some mentioned that there are many subdivided units in the district. Now, subdivided units should not stand in the way of failure to comply with fire safety standards. But with subdivided units, there will be more households in a building. So when the risk gets assessed, will the number of subdivided units account for, matter in the marking scheme? That's my first question. Second one. Now, some OCs have told us that they have just complied with the fire services order, but soon they receive an order from the buildings department, and it's still about fire services. Yes, we know that there is now better communication between the fire services department and the buildings department. But how can we assure owners that after they have complied with one order, it will be several years later at least before there's another order? Because, even with the mandatory window inspection scheme is only done every 5 years, then because if there are too many orders, then owners have to keep chipping in to the cost of such works. Deputy Secretary. First, about the cost of the works. Will costs be jacked up? Well, that has to do with two factors. One is the manpower or the supply. Now, there are over 1,000 registered fire services contractors. Some 300 of them have already indicated interest in taking up the defaulted works. We believe more contractors will be on the list, so that means there will be more contractors carrying out the works. And second question is really about how we tender for defaulted works. We'll go by the established procurement rules. So we'll look at the technical aspect, we'll look at past performance and the cost of materials and so on. There are indexes for such costs. Subdivided units. Well, there's a advisory committee to set priorities, so it will be an objective and transparent mechanism. There's mention of the status of titles, and whether there are existing fire safety hazards, and so we'll consider the risk, including the risk relating to subdivided units. Now, and also at the bureau level, there's a platform to make sure there's proper communication. So when we carry out the works, we would like to give enough sufficient assistance to owners in one go. We don't want any duplication. Ms. Carmen Can, thank you. Now, I would like to thank the 10 deputations and individuals who came to give their views. I would also like to thank the other 2 deputations who made written submissions. They will help the government to consider whether their proposed amendments are suitable, and also they will help the government to see what the concerns are. Now, I think everyone agrees that we should empower the enforcement authorities to carry out defaulted works and recover the costs afterwards. I think discussion should really focus on the mechanisms concerned. Just now, we've heard questions about the factors to be considered in terms of the eligibility criteria. And then when will the criteria be out? Will the criteria be spelled out in the bill, or will that be left to the advisory committees? And the Deputy Secretary mentioned in his speech that the priorities will be set by the advisory committees because there are so many target buildings. So when will that happen? I think we need a clear answer. The documents have been prepared by the Secretariat, and we know that how many target buildings there are, and we've asked how many target buildings may be affected by the bill, and the administration said it's about 300 to 400 target buildings for which defaulted works may be carried out. And then some OCs may think, since there will be the defaulted works mechanism, then they'll wait for the government to act. And that's the point mentioned by Mr. Kwok Wai Keung as well. But then it should be the obligations of owners to carry out works. So it's not that we don't actually want to see too many defaulted works. Now, so how many buildings to be considered each year? The government is talking about maybe 660 buildings each year but we'd like more information. We want to focus our attention on this point, so we want a clear answer from the government. Second point, the Hong Kong Institute of Engineers, or rather the Institute of Fire Engineers, Hong Kong branch, mentioned something about Cap 95F. Now we are making reference to the penalty level for Cap 95F, and we are aligning that with the penalty for the ordinance. But maybe this ordinance is not the same as Cap 95F, because Cap 95F is about imminent fire risk, whereas for this ordinance it's not about imminent fire risk, but rather improving the fire safety standards. I think I've got it right. That's why the penalty level should not be the same. That's what I've heard from the deputation. I said to be corrected. And then the 3 months deadline for notifying transfer of interest. I've actually given my views to the administration on that. The Law Society and the Estate Agent Association need to be informed of this requirement, so then they could remind the new owner to give the notification.
Yes, thank you for the questions. It is our objective to help committed owners who lack the capability of carrying out works. We carry out defaulted works on their behalf. So the objective is very clear. There are owners who are capable, who are committed, and we are not going to help them by carrying out the works on their behalf, because this is not a reasonable use of public resources. As a result, after carrying out defaulted works, we impose a surcharge of 20% to prevent anyone from relying on the defaulted works mechanism and evade their own responsibility as owners. So you mentioned the figure. We are going to include 200 to 400 buildings in the mechanism. That means 60 buildings a year. Next, turning to penalties. There is a need to increase the penalties under Cap 572. We have made reference to similar provisions in the fire safety ordinance, and we believe that Cap 95F is one that is close to our proposal. Many owners have yet to comply with the orders under Cap 95F. So we've made reference to Cap 95F and the penalty. Now, we have made reference to the penalty levels in Cap 95F, and according to the collected statistics collected, we find the levels appropriate. We don't need to further amend them. Professor Priscilla Lam. Thank you, Chairman. I thank deputations and individuals for coming to our meeting. I understand that there is general support for this amendment bill. Now, I myself made this suggestion in 2015. I believe the Director of Fire Services should be given the same level of discretion as the Director of Buildings, so that when there is a fire hazard, the Fire Services Department could step in. I am glad to see this breakthrough this year. Now, I also appreciate that the purpose of this bill is to protect lives, and there should not be any delay. So, whilst implementing the mechanism, we need to make sure that the mechanism doesn't would or won't be overwhelmed by the positive response from the public. So I want to know more about the registration mechanism, so to speak. It's not the case that once you make an application or you apply for registration, you get help at once. Now, day in, day out, we see numerous cases of OCs not being able to find owners. They can't trace the owners. So whether or not they should apply for this registration, it's your own decision, because in the end of the day, you need to pay up. So after making the application, you have joined the system, so to speak, and then we rely on the advisory committees, which should be fair and impartial. And there is a question on whether they will be able to oversee so many applications, and that the prioritization criteria will be laid down. The applications will be given, will be considered according to this prioritization criteria. Now, I emphasize that at the end of the day, even if you've joined the queue, you need to pay in the end. So the emphasis is on owners who are committed but not capable of carrying out works on their own, and that they will need to pay up later. Now, in terms of penalty, there should not be a substantial increase to make the penalties harsher. Like Cap 344, some owners' corporations may not be very clear about the latest changes, and we need to help them, because we need to impose fines in order to save lives. Lives matter more than financial penalty when it comes to fire safety hazards. You need to take this angle to make the public accept the proposed penalties. The purpose is not just to punish them. We need to deter them from allowing the hazards to continue. In fact, I jotted down the points made by deputations. Well, I believe that by the time the mechanism is introduced, the code of practice should be drawn up to provide clarity and assistance. DS? Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Professor Leung. About the registration mechanism, isn't it a good deed if the owner or the OCs come forward to apply on their own? That means they are truly committed. We have a package of services. First of all, we have the Building Improvement Support Center. This support center will provide advice and information to the applicants, because we provide a one-stop service and we follow the cases through. So for committed owners, we do encourage them to approach the support center. They may wish to know more about their eligibility for the defaulted works mechanism or the building status in general. They can talk to the FST Building Improvement Support Center. We note Professor Leung's point on penalties. As I explained earlier, a term of imprisonment may be too harsh a penalty. We've made reference to the relevant fire safety legislation, and the penalty of imprisonment is reserved for really grave offences. So we believe the proposed penalties are appropriate. Dr. Lo Wai Kwok. Thank you, Chairman. I thank all the views expressed in person or in writing on Fire Safety Buildings Amendment Bill 2024. We are receiving deputations today. Many of the representatives work in the local communities. They are familiar with the problems surrounding 3 new buildings. We also have representatives from professional bodies. Now, from what I heard, I think there is support from the community on this bill. Many would like to see the structural or fire safety of their buildings improved. Whether you live in that property or you lease it to a tenant, you want to be reassured. So I believe this is the consensus, which is quite apparent. But at the last meeting, a member raised this concern. That is, owners may become over-reliant on the defaulted works mechanism. Even with a 20% surcharge, they still feel reassured because government works will definitely meet the requirements. For buildings without owners, corporations, they may be victims of bid rigging. But if the government steps in, there won't be any bid rigging. So I think that the 20% surcharge could be a problem in itself because it's still relatively cheap. So for the whole process, we need to explain very clearly that even with the government stepping in, the owners are not absolved of their liabilities. In terms of publicity and education, I think the government should make this point very clearly to address the concern, as I mentioned. On the other hand, the other concern is that overall, we have a very heavy workload under defaulted works mechanism or otherwise because there are so many aged buildings in Hong Kong that needs upgrading. So I'm concerned about the capacity of the FSI trade. The trade's capacity should not be an excuse for delaying the works because lives are at stake. So I'm concerned about how we meet the objective by removing obstacles in the process so that we expedite the works. And at the same time, we need to be pragmatic when it comes to the nitty-gritty. For example, water tanks may not be installed in old buildings. There should be improvised devices. We need more discussion. We need a joint effort between the government and the industry in order to solve problems. Now, next, I'd like to take the government to task. I have been going after the government for a long time. In 2017, an amendment bill was passed to introduce a registered fire service engineer system. At that time, the view was that there was already too much on the plate of the fire services department. So a third-party mechanism was introduced for the registered fire engineers to shoulder some of the work. Despite passage of the bill, the subsidiary legislation for implementation of the proposal still hasn't been passed.
Deputy Secretary. Thank you, Dr. Low. So the concern is that there may be over-reliance on defaulted works. So that's why the bill is covering all aspects of the issue. Now, of course, we must continue to carry out enforcement works, and if people don't comply with the orders, or they are breaking the law, and therefore we are increasing the penalty. And that's one way to tackle the issue. The other is that if people over-rely on the defaulted works, thinking that then they can be absolutely sure there's full compliance and there won't be the risk of bid rigging and so on. Well, we have actually created a white list. So there are contractors that have completed the work successfully, so they are on the list, and they will be good reference to owners. And then, of course, there is also the smart tender system. This is a good platform. If owners join the smart tender platform, then there will be professionals to help with some evaluating the works and assessing the cost. And it's an e-platform, so when they receive tenders, there will be professionals to help them. So these are various ways to enhance the capacity of owners in carrying the works on their own. And registered fire engineers. The trade very much supports this proposal. We keep in communication with the stakeholders. In the first quarter of this year, the FSD has completed a trade consultation on the code of practice for registered fire engineers. We will continue to take forward work. We hope to submit the relevant legislation to this council as soon as possible. Next, Dr. Shou Chang-Wing. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to thank the deputations for their interest in the bill. And they all support the bill. Now, you've all raised some common issues. So I hope the government will consider carefully two issues in particular in relation to the amendment exercise. And the government can consider the relevant provisions carefully. Now, first issue. There are about 9,000 buildings that have received compliance order or directions. They will have to commence works soon. Mr. Kwok Wai Keung raised a point, and the Deputy Secretary gave a reply. That is, there are just 300 or so eligible contractors, and on the white list, there are just about 90 plus contractors out of the 300 plus. So that means it would take 8 to 10 years before all the fire safety directions can be complied with. The Deputy Secretary said more companies will be included on the contractors list. So are there actual incentives for companies to join the list? This bill is the result of the Lucky House fire. That's why there's an urgency to amend the ordinance. That's why even during the summer recess, the Bills Committee is working hard still. This is actually the second meeting of the Bills Committee because we want to pass the bill complete the work on this bill as soon as possible. We don't want the loopholes to stay for too long. But then if all the works can only be completed in 8 or 10 years, that means the fire risk remains. So what are we going to do about that? So in the legislative amendment exercise, you have to consider this point. That is the urgency of preventing fire risk and the need to carry the works How do you strike a balance there? Second point, in the first half of this year, FSD took out prosecution against 1,000 buildings that did not comply with the direction. That's a substantial increase compared to the previous year. Mr. Chris Tang, Secretary for Security, said in this council that over 10,400 orders and building orders and over 370,000 fire safety directions were issued. And, for the 370 fire safety directions, 30% of them have been complied with, but the remaining are still outstanding. So we look at those figures against the 1,000 prosecutions. Definitely, that's not proportionate. So I don't know what FSD thinks of this ratio. Maybe there are difficulties in gathering sufficient evidence now, and if in future after the bill is passed still we're not able to carry out effective enforcement, then that will reduce the effectiveness of the bill. So we must make sure that there is effective prosecution for the bill to be effective too. Deputy Secretary. Thank you. Well, let's look at the figures first. We've issued over fire safety directions to over 10,400 buildings, and for 1,000 buildings, the FSDs have been complied with. That means there are about 5,800 buildings that are actively following up on the directions. So here is really about two issues: the manpower and the number of prosecutions. Now, for these 5,000 plus buildings, they are actively following up on the case, and so we've already counted the manpower needed from the trade to carry out the works, or in some cases the works are being carried out. And so now if we prosecute, it's because there is no reasonable excuse for not carrying out works. That's why for these 5,000 plus buildings, they are not a target of prosecution. And for the remaining buildings, 1,200 target buildings, they are making initial progress. And that means that there are 2,000 target buildings without any progress. So that's how we break down the figures. On manpower in the trade, there are 1,000 registered fire services installation contractors. When we asked how many contractors are interested in these works, there are about 300 that made the indication. And so if there is a demand for more such works, I'm sure the trade will respond quickly. And our baseline is 1,000 buildings as the target for carrying out works. On prosecution, I'll ask the FSD colleagues to explain. Now, it may seem that there are many directions that have not yet been complied with, but if owners are actively following up on the directions and carrying out works to comply with the directions, then we'll give them more time. The direction usually has a deadline of 1 year, but then maybe it takes more time for owners to organize the works. And if we see that there is active progress, then we will extend the deadline. So that means that we don't need to take out prosecution against these buildings. We follow just a straightforward principle. If we see that it's the deadline for direction, we'll find out from the owners what they're doing, whether they're ignoring the directions or they're already taking action. And if owners are actively following up on the directions, then we'll consider extending the deadline. But then if it's a deadline and when we find out, and then we find out from the owners that no action is being taken, or very often they will come up with the excuse that we are trying to arrange a meeting with owners. But then if after several extensions of the deadline, the owners, corporations are still using the same excuse, and we know that they are not actively taking action, but rather they're just using that as an excuse to ask for further extension. So we have stepped up our action in this respect. Last year, we had only about 300 prosecution cases or so, but this year we have some 1,000 prosecution cases. So that means that we are stepping up action to prosecute owners. If we find that owners are not taking any action at all, then we will prosecute them. Thank you.
Right. I do have some questions as well. Some of them touch on the comments made by those who are here today. Mr. Chong Man-ching just now mentioned the following. Some owners may have a larger share of title, and this owner may refuse to pay or delay in paying. So the majority owners may be committed, but there could be some individuals who are uncooperative. Prosecution takes time. The bill provides penalties. But we don't want works to be suspended for want of payment. So you should think about that because it takes time to initiate prosecution. So how are you going to handle these cases? The second question is one that Ms. Carmen Kan also asked. You want to encourage owners to use the system, but you don't want over-reliance. Like Dr. Loh Wai Kwok said, they may be happy to pay the 20% surcharge. So it's very important to consider these factors. If you're going to be bumped out of the queue, then you may as well carry out the works on your own. Like Professor Priscilla Leung said, in the end of the day, if an accident happens, your lives and your property will be at stake. So whilst we are discussing this bill, you should lay out these facts as soon as possible to explain to the public the criteria concerned, that if you are not eligible, you may as well carry out the works yourselves sooner. So I hope you consider this as well. Another concern expressed by members is this. They are concerned about the huge workload and just a small number of contractors available, and that may jack up costs. Well, you mentioned the smart tender services, but still, you need to give us the ballpark figure as early as possible, not to ambush owners in the end, because you mentioned that these advisory committees will comprise engineers, and we also have those with experience in project costs. They should be invited to join the committees as well, including surveyors. I believe that they have the experience and they are familiar with the laws. So I've made 3 points for the government's consideration. Any response from the DS? Thank you, Chairman. Responding to what you said, we want to increase deterrence to drive a change of mindset among owners. Some owners are fully aware of the resolution passed by the OCs and that works may be carried out very soon. They will be required to contribute to the cost. And yet some owners refuse to make this contribution. And this is a major obstacle. So we are driving this change by introducing a clause on obstructing the OC. Yes, we understand that. But I'm talking about the prosecution stage. I'm just saying that the time frame should be compressed because otherwise the delays will affect everybody in the building. I understand your point. Yes, we want to drive a change in the mindset of owners. Well, because you must have come across cases concerning compliance, and this is definitely an area of concern. We note the committee's views, and turning to the next point on the project costs. After we've decided to carry out the defaulted works, we will invite contractors that are more prominent in the trade, that can provide a more reliable set of cost estimates for reference. All right, members, the first item is to meet with deputations and individuals. We originally set 1.5 hours for this item. Now we still have 2 more members who'd like to ask follow-up questions, Mr. Kwok Wai Keung, Ms. Carmen Kan, as well as Mr. Edward Leung, who just indicated his wish to speak as well. After I allow these 3 members to put their questions, I think we should wrap up the first item on the agenda. Mr. Edward Leung, you may start 4 minutes. Thank you, Chairman. According to the paper, if an owner obstructs an owner's corporation in complying with the ordinance, then this owner will be committing an offense. This is a frequent occurrence, so it is good that a penalty is put in place. But what is meant by obstruction? Say if a developer puts a nail in the building, so to speak, and if this owner becomes a member of the OC and yet often is often absent from OC meetings, causing the meeting to be aborted, then what should be done about it? It seems to happen quite often. Some owners may think that the project cost or the bid is too high, is unreasonable, and would an owner that votes against this bid be committing this obstruction offense? There are also many owners who couldn't care less about the OC meetings. The OC meeting may, as a result, be aborted. Will they be liable for obstructing the OC's work? I think there should be a clear definition of what obstruction means here to prevent anyone from being inadvertently caught by the offense. Yes. Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Leung. We have made reference to the mechanism under the Buildings Ordinance targeting uncooperative owners to increase the penalty of the obstruction offense. If an owner obstructs the OC in complying with the order under the ordinance, the EA concerned will take enforcement action. First of all, the relevant minutes of meetings requiring action to be taken will be retrieved from the OC, and that the relevant owner's details will also be obtained. We will find out what this owner has done in obstructing the work of the OC. And whether this will also check if sufficient notice has been given to this uncooperative owner. We will also consider whether the explanation given by the uncooperative owner is justified. So we consider the owner's position, the legal requirement, and we also warn this uncooperative owner of his action and that he may be breaching the law. Now, if this owner still ignores this warning, then we'll take enforcement action. I think the buildings department can share their experience with us. From the buildings department, please, Ms. Ng. Well, there is this provision under the buildings ordinance. It provides that anyone obstructing the OC in complying with an order issued by the buildings department will be subject to prosecution. To answer Mr. Leung's question on whether cases of this nail household will affect the progress. Now, if we investigate into cases of non-compliance with the order, we will look into the relevant owners, and if there is a nail household involved, we will give priority to prosecuting that owner. And for other owners who have shown commitment, they will be given a lesser priority in terms of prosecution. DS just now mentioned, when we consider the obstruction case, we will investigate into the matter by listening to the explanations of different parties, say the OC's accusation as well as the explanation given by the owner so accused of causing the obstruction. We may also refer the case to, say, the Home Affairs Department to help with mediation. Now, very often when we step in, we help resolve the dispute. And if other non-compliances are identified, the case may also refer to other law enforcement agencies, such as the police and the ICAC. So we need to consider the facts of the cases. For members going for a second round, I'll give each of them 3 minutes. Mr. Kwok Wai-keung. Thank you, Chairman. Two individuals have written in, but they are not here today, one of whom is Ms. Flora Lau. So let me put this question on her behalf. Under the proposed, the bill has proposed to impose more penalties under Cap 572. Now, for commercial premises, other pieces of legislation may be relevant, such as Cap 502 and Cap 636, and that by comparison, the penalties in this bill seem to be harsher than these other pieces of legislation. And she's questioning why the increased penalties only apply to individual owners but not major landlords or in commercial properties. And coming back to the point I just made, it is envisaged that this defaulted works mechanism may become very popular. And your explanation is that some owners should be aware of the fact that they may be ineligible and they should not wait for the government to step in. So in the first 3 years, you should pick those who are eligible and help them join this queue. set a time frame of 3 years, because otherwise, if you are not eligible in the first year but eligible in the second year, they are in a limbo whether to apply. So you should set a time frame in terms of eligibility. The third point is about the trade's capacity. You should make a better projection, because it has to do with the directions or orders to be issued. If it goes beyond the trade's capacity, it's going to cause an embarrassment, because the trade will be short of hands to help meet the orders or directions. Yes. The purpose of increasing the penalties is to increase deterrence, to boost the compliance to Cap 572. For commercial properties under Cap 502, the compliance rate is over 90%. There is no pressure to increase the penalty levels in Cap 502, whereas for industrial buildings under Cap 636, works are in active progress. I mean, this legislation was enacted a few years ago. We have yet to come across any cases of non-compliance. That is why we are making proposals corresponding to the proposals in the amendment bill. About the defaulted works mechanism to be introduced, the objective is to help committed owners who are capable of carrying out works on their own. For capable owners, even if they run into difficulties, they should approach the Building Improvement Support Center for help. They should not guess whether they will be they should not guess whether the government will be stepping in and carrying out the works on their behalf. I'll give the floor to the FSD. For the defaulted works mechanism, after the bill has been passed, we are going to seek advice from the Advisory Committee on prioritization criteria. For building owners who are not capable of carrying out works, we will rely on a marking scheme to accord priority to different cases. Our target is to carry out works for 20 to 60 buildings a year, and if they are selected, they will be informed. Say if every year we target to carry out works for 60 buildings, for the 61st or 62nd building, they will not be informed, because we still want them to carry out works on their own initiative. We'll continue to provide assistance to these owners. Now, to answer what Mr. Kwok's question, what if the owners have already begun the works on their own, only to find that subsequently that they are actually eligible? This will not happen, because if works have begun, the government will not step in to carry out defaulted works.
Well, in deciding whether an OC is eligible to join the mechanism, well, you should just reject the applications, because that means the OCs are keen to carry out works, but then at the same time depends on whether individual owners are cooperative or not. So I hope you'll give them more time before you decide whether to reject an application. It's the same point as mentioned by Mr. Chung. And the penalty is one thing, but then you need to speed up the prosecution, because then there will be a strong deterrent effect, and cooperative owners will then pay up. So I think that could help to address the concern. Ms. Carmen Ken. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Now, the public hearing is an occasion for the government to explain if these measures work. So the defaulted work should be the last resort We don't want people to think that, oh, if they can't do it, they will just leave it to the government to do the defaulted works. Now, the surcharge of 20% is actually to discourage owners from going for defaulted works, because this maximum is to help those with genuine needs. So when you set the threshold and when you design the marking scheme, you have to make sure that this policy intention is reflected. So it goes back to your earlier question, Chairman. So when will you publish the marking scheme, and how will you publish the marking scheme? You're going to wait till the advisory committees expand the functions and you leave it to the committees? That's the first question. Second question, okay, once we decide to go for defaulted works, then we will issue probably the payment notice to owners based on the cost apportioned by shares. But then for the old, infirmed, or owners, you may consider waiving the surcharge for them. So perhaps you could take this opportunity to explain what the considerations are. And if there's a default in payment, will there be civil or criminal consequences? Mr. Yam, Deputy Secretary, I agree with Ms. Kan. The defaulted work should be the last resort. On the eligibility criteria, we will consider the views of this Bills Committee. And after the ordinance is amended, there will be ample discussion with the referent panel, and then there will be a mechanism for setting priorities, and we'll seek your views on that too. Now, let's say payment notice has been issued to the OC and the OC fails to pay up. Well, we'll have to look at the circumstances of the case. It may be a case of owners unwilling to take up their obligations, and then we could prosecute them. The third point about surcharge, I'll ask the Buildings Department to explain their experience. Well, the Buildings Department has some guideline is published. That is, say, if the defaulted works are carried out, then usually there's a surcharge of not more than 20%. But then in the guideline, which is uploaded to our website, it says that if a building encounters certain difficulties, and then we say that we will just charge 10% of surcharge. But then if the owners involved are old or have disabilities, and there are there's other proof of difficulties, and we may waive the surcharge altogether. So the whole mechanism is transparent and open, and therefore, when with this amendment bill, there's a reference made to the practice of the Buildings Department. Thank you. So that's the end of item 1, meeting with deputations and administration. I would like to thank all deputations and individuals for coming to give their views. As I said at the beginning of the meeting, if you have a submission or a speech, do pass it to the Secretariat before you leave. Before we go to item 2, perhaps we'll take a 5-minute break. Let's resume the meeting at 4:15. Thank you.